Every conversation can and will elevate you. It's where real talk meets real growth. Welcome back to Level Up. Today I'm joined by Vlatka, a revenue and profitability consultant with more than 20 years in hospitality. Vlatka has led revenue strategy across major hotel groups, including Circle Collection and Citizen and has worked across key markets in Europe and the US. In this episode, we will talk about revenue, profitability, leadership, AI, and what hotels need to do today to stay competitive and commercial in fast-changing market. Welcome to the show, Vlatka.
Hey, thank you so much, Hakim.
I'm excited. This is the first time in the show that I have somebody from the revenue background, so I'm really excited to
Super.
learn from you. Of course, you have had an impressive journey across operations, reservations, sales, revenue, leadership. But when you look back, and let's start from here, when you look back, what pulled you towards revenue? Like, because you've been to so many different departments or direction, why revenue?
Yeah. Okay. So I'll tell you a little story. I'll try to keep it short. But yeah, I started working in hotels already at the age of 14. And already my first year of college, I was supervisor at the front desk. Fast forward, I had this dream. I'm going to be a general manager one day. And so I did all the positions of, director of reservations, store manager, front office manager, assistant GM, et cetera, et cetera. And then at one moment, I was at the Pierre Hotel in New York. And they were looking for director of reservations / revenue manager, which is like entry to be a revenue manager. And actually the head of revenue approached me and he said, I think you would be a great candidate. I see what you did in this and that department. So I was like, okay, what is all of this, right? So I got into it a little bit by chance. And then, of course, like it's super interesting. I also, of course, love that I'm not going to work all the holidays and night shifts and weekends anymore. So that's quite a benefit. But yeah, at the same time, I actually had an offer to be a GM in one of the properties in Times Square. And it was more money to be a GM. But I said, you know what? I really like this a little bit better. It's a little bit more interesting. So I picked revenue. And now that was 12 years ago.
Nice.
Yeah. Been quite a journey, and I'm really happy because I can still relate to this operational experience, and especially when I worked with clients, I can really put myself in their shoes. That really helps me in doing revenue together with other departments, and so it helps me. But I can now really understand the whole financial part and the strategy. Yeah,
and that was the moment that you said, okay, now revenue is the way to go, or was there other inspiration or motivation that really built that ambition and motivation towards revenue?
Well, yeah, originally I was, of course, just learning, but the great part was that I learned revenue at the 5-star luxury property on Fifth Avenue overlooking Central Park. So like cheapest rates were $800 ADR type thing. It was really a crash course of the highest rates. And then, of course, as I moved along, I worked with all kinds of different hotels, all different levels and all kind of different locations and business. And that made it even more interesting, exploring all different markets and different companies.
Yeah. Really interesting. And you have also worked across Croatia, the US, and Europe. So a lot of continent and absolutely different markets and different hotel concepts from luxury to lifestyle. Of course, we work together at Citizen. So as well, really one of the leading lifestyle brands that, what did those different markets teach you about revenue?
Yeah. Well, you mentioned Citizen M, so love the time when we worked together there.
Yeah,
It's been a minute. Time really flies. But yeah, at that time, I looked after the whole US market. As you know, when I started, we had 3 hotels in the US, and when I left, we had like 16, 17.
Yeah, correct.
So, together with the team, I opened all these hotels in different cities and markets. For example, when I was in New York, I worked only locally, and then at one point, for the last 2 years in New York, I worked for RevRock, which is the revenue consulting outsource company. And then, I looked after all kinds of hotels and open hotels in Miami and LA and New York and Boston and so on. And so these were all more like city based, right? And then in some of my recent position, I looked after properties within Europe and UK and all kinds of, from like a 20-room hotel to 400-room hotel, right? So I think there is a different pace in the city, and I see that, let's say, across US and Europe. So while I see a little bit when it comes to more independent hotels, which is what I focus now with Aya Group. So I moved to consulting because I'm on a mission to help hotels that maybe cannot afford a revenue manager or full time, to really help them with the revenue strategies. And then
Right.
after I educate them, they can also continue it. And what I see with these smaller individual properties is a little bit more in relationship based. So
Hmm.
that is, I think, the biggest difference. And I would say maybe Europe is in general a little bit more relationship based than the US. US is really like business driven, right? And a high pace and long hours and all of that. But I would say this is the biggest difference. And I do think that, yeah, if you just readjust your strategy, and essentially it's a revenue strategy, right? So you might have a hotel that has a lot of group business, then it will be completely different business mix than, also based on the location and the size and all these kind of
Right.
things. Yeah.
Yeah, this is really, I'm really interested also to learn about what you're doing now. You mentioned it briefly, but
Yeah.
yeah, let's talk about it. What are you doing now?
Yeah. So I've been doing revenue for other companies for quite some time, and opening also different hotels gave me really the knowledge of like how to do the whole, startup strategy. What I really notice is a little bit of a gap when it comes to individual hotels, or
Hmm.
maybe a smaller like group of 2, 3 hotels.
Yeah.
Um, they may not be able to afford revenue manager, but also they may not see the importance of revenue manager. And yes, you often have the situation that the GM sometimes or somebody in sales changes the rate here or there, and that's it. So I'm really trying to help them in implementing their revenue strategy. So I'm not there to really stay forever, but rather, like
With
I
the foundation, yeah.
work, let's say, on a 6-month contract, and then, okay, we're going to see what needs to be fixed. We're going to work on it together and fix it together. And I will teach you how to maintain it. And I'm always there for questions. Because then, like, especially, they cannot afford somebody on this, let's say, executive level, right? Where experience that I have in revenue.
Correct.
But
Correct.
then you can have that for like part time or a certain period of time. And then you can still maintain it internally after,
Yeah.
the
Yeah.
education part.
That's
Yeah.
really interesting. Really interesting. And you started your own agency consultancy like
Yeah.
a year ago, if I remember correct.
A little bit less than that.
Almost a year.
In October, yeah, it was in October, so 6 months ago. But yeah, now I'm really on a full swing and busy growing the business. Of course, doing the sales for the business,
Of course.
but of course at the same time doing work with the clients. So it's a little bit of shuffling at the moment,
Yeah. I
but
know.
I
I know.
really enjoy it. Yeah, I see the progress, so that's good. Yeah, yeah.
Definitely. No, that's really good to hear. And of course, you have great background in different markets, managing some very successful hotels. So I wish you all the best at that. And of course,
Thank you.
yeah, definitely, definitely. Let's jump little bit more into the revenue part and
Yeah,
the profitability.
because I'm the first one on the podcast about revenue.
Yes, you are. Yes, you are. Yes, you are.
I love that. I didn't know that.
Vlatka, a lot of people still talk about revenue as filling rooms and pushing rate, but today the conversation is much more about profitability. In your opinion, what do too many hoteliers still get wrong when they think about revenue? Maybe a lot, but I want to hear from you.
There's a lot of things that are still being done wrong, but yeah. I think there's a lot of uncertainty in our industry where, yeah, the booking patterns changed. You have a lot of last minute bookings, right? But then you also have people that are planning like 12 months ahead. So you have to be also prepared for that.
Mm,
So I think one thing is what I see a lot that hotels are doing is the reverse pricing, where yeah, you start really high with high expectations. Maybe you're pricing based on your budget that is maybe not realistic, and
yeah,
change, right? So and then everybody kind of like drops their rates last minute, and this reverse pricing really hurts everyone.
yeah,
So yeah, I prefer to have a strategy, yeah, really far out, be priced properly and not really dream. Then create your base, really work on your business mix, create your base, and then fill in. And hopefully when everybody else is dropping their rates, you have maybe a few rooms left or none. So that is kind of, I think, what I see a lot happening. And of course, the profitability you mentioned, that is big focus. And that's why, I don't say I'm the revenue consultant, but I say I'm revenue and profitability consultant, because in my experience, this is really the main focus. Your different business really costs differently, right? If you book a room for 200 euros and you book it via an OTA and there is 18% commission or 20%, that is not a 200 euros that you're getting in the end, right?
That's true.
Yeah. And also like direct business, we used to consider direct business, for free, but it's not, because you might need to have a system, you might need to pay for ads or Google ads, people to manage it, whether it's outsourced or in-house. Maybe you have your marketing team, e-commerce team, and so on. So if you do the calculation, normally now direct business costs anywhere between 8 and 10% in commission, but it's not a commission, but it's...
You're right.
So I think everybody should change towards this net revenue model where we really calculate the cost. And when I started working with one client recently, a few months ago, first thing I said, because it was the low season, and I said, okay, what is your CPRR, cost per occupied room? And they're like, oh, we need to calculate this, right? So this is something that you should not really price below, because then you're paying for that room. You're not really, gaining anything. So really switching to that model is, I think, really important. And not just on your P&L, but also if you can change it in your, let's say, revenue management system, if you have it, to really calculate already really apples to apples, right?
Yeah.
You have OTAs with commission, and then you just have your amazing rate on your direct website without commission.
That's true. It's a really valid point. And see, it's a hot topic. Like everyone, of course, trying to, shift and get a little bit more direct. But like you said, there's hidden costs, like a system where people use and all that. What is your advice in that situation? Like, how can a hotel make that balance between relying on OTAs? Because a lot of hotels, in the end, the founders and investors want to see revenues and want to see the profit, the money. So what is your advice here?
Yeah, I think, of course, direct business is still, and it should be your focus. But via your direct, unless you're a Marriott, maybe not even, you will never have the distributional power to gain the first-time guest as much as they could do it for you, right? So we work with OTAs, and they're our partners. So I really try to look at OTAs as your partners, and they are going to get your first-time guests for you.
That's correct.
Mention the destination, and then they will find you, right? Then it's about how are you going to potentially convert that business into direct business. So how are you going to keep that guest coming, ideally via direct, right? Because volume from OTAs will always be there and come, because of course their marketing and e-commerce power is huge. So it's really about looking at it as partners. That's how I look at it, right? And not as a bad thing. There's a lot of discussions on
you're right.
for years and years, but that's how I try to look at it. And also what I see as a common mistake, hotels working with like so many OTAs, right? And the first thing I do, if I do an audit, and we need to review the production of any part.
Each one,
Whether it's OTAs or it's if you have a corporate or wholesale or consortia business, and when are they booking? Are they booking into your peak months and taking away potential business that you would book on direct anyways, helping you in your shoulder season? So these are the kind of things that I always evaluate. And does it make sense to continue this partnership? I just reviewed one of the smaller OTAs for a client recently, and I was like, they're booking nothing. So why do we have this contract?
Why you pay for that? Yeah. You're right.
Sharing conversation with them. Okay, can we do something differently, or are you just not booking into our market? Because if that's the case, then you have to have a revenue manager maintaining the rates and the contract and parity and promotions. It all costs time and money. So I'm rather like, have a strategy of fewer really good partners that you really have a good relationship with, and maintain that relationship, and then get the business that you need, and you help each other. Versus
you're right.
contracts and partners and yeah, and then you're a little bit lost as a hotel in that. So yeah, that is my approach in general.
But this is definitely correct. And I always also thought of the same, that there's a lot of hotels, especially the independent and the lifestyle. And I'm going to come to this in a moment, but it's
Yeah.
really, you have to start with OTAs, otherwise you're not going to be. But I think the point is that sometimes a lot of hotels will relay a lot, and then it's becoming that risky of
Yeah.
not to. Like, okay,
Yeah.
what if
Eh,
we don't?
Yes, indeed. Yeah, I was just about to say that. Be careful of like not putting all eggs into one basket, of course,
Yes,
because
yes.
makes it really. I had a situation in Amsterdam like a year and a half, 2 years ago, when one of the big companies, I'm not gonna name names, one of the big offices moved, and they had like huge area, and our hotel was right next to them, and it was like our budget B minus because it's huge
Yeah.
chunk of the business going there. And I just started looking after that hotel, and I was like, okay, but who looked at like potentials if this happened? What can we do like to mitigate this loss? What other business are we going to drive if this happens, right? So I'm not saying you should not, yeah, take this amazing business if it's there, but you need to have a backup plan that if
Course,
this
of
doesn't
course.
materials. I mean, we're going through an RFP season every year, as you know. That is your forte.
Yeah.
So yeah, you go through that, and it's always questionable. Are they going to accept our new rates? What are their expectations? Maybe our budget is 5% up, and they want 10% less. So
Yeah.
and then it's a huge chunk of your business. So it's a very like volatile. So you have to have a backup plan, and I think that's part of the preparation for the budget process every year, which should happen early. You know how we did it quite early, and
Yes,
we started conversation in like April, May. By June, we had the sales strategy kind of done. What is going to happen? Because
I
then you're
remember
really
it.
ready for the RFP.
Yeah,
Yeah, I
definitely.
remember.
Yeah, I do remember
Yeah,
those guys. So,
yes, yeah,
but of course,
yeah. So it's
it's
about also being. Yeah,
absolutely independent hotels and lifestyle brands. I think this is interesting for me, but also for you, and because of course the large corporation is, it's another story. You can have another 10 podcasts about that. But
yeah.
your mission today, as I learned, is helping independent luxury and lifestyle hotels meet their goals through customized strategies. What makes actually independent and lifestyle hotels commercially exciting, but also more challenging? I'm guessing for you.
Yeah. I think the systems.
Mm.
Um, because you are really a little bit like in silos. And I'll give you an example. I have a client that has a Ferrari in RMS, but then their PMS is, I'm trying to think of some super
Yeah,
logo.
you can't find no name.
So, they're like, there is a situation where yes, they talk to each other. There is an API connection, but
Yeah,
there's a
connectivity. Yeah,
QA and these kind of things. And then also because you have so many options, and you have okay, I want to do upsell, and then I want to do email marketing, and then I want to have guest communication pre, post, and during the stay, and I want to have a chatbot, and then often you come into this situation that you have like so many systems. Indeed, they're not at the same level often, and then to change some of the main systems like PMS, it's not a little task, right? It's a huge thing that you
yeah,
do once blue moon when you really need to. And you have also a lot of options. So I'm also focusing now to really evaluate what is out in the market, because of course I advise my clients potentially on what are some of the options that they can do if they need to make a switch, and what makes sense, because it could be an amazing RMS, revenue management software, for that I worked with in a, let's say, hotel chain group, right? But then maybe it's not the right fit for somebody that has two hotels. So
that's correct.
that's
That's
something.
correct. It's a
Yeah.
big challenge, I would say, as well, is to find those, systems that can talk together, like connectivity, because of course, when you don't have that, then you're missing a lot of opportunities and also adding lots of work, on your plate. But really, really interesting. If I ask you a question, if you walked into lifestyle independent hotel, really want to improve performance in the first 30 days, what would be the first things you would pick up, like need to change?
Well, I mean, first I normally do
Look
the
at, like, at least like something that you have to look at. Yeah.
call it an audit a little bit, right? So I will kind of poke into every little part of revenue, but I will not go super deep. So, whether it's comp set analysis, but it's like a brief one. Does it make sense where you are comparing yourself with? Segmentation mix. Okay. Does it make sense? Like business that you're getting from different segments for your size or location or all of that. Yeah. Are you overpaying maybe for your commissions? Do you maybe have 50% of wholesale business, which should be base business, and you're paying huge commissions and you would be selling that business? So yeah, take some of the wholesale if you want to work with that and your market is working with wholesale, but then make it base business, right? So this is the kind of like, and then of course, yeah, I look at the tech stacks, what really, yeah. And I think another big one is pricing psychology. So is the rate structure clear? What about the rate parity? Are there many like confusing specials and offers? And yeah, how are these things like working with your brand? Is it like is it within your,
Yeah, correct. Yeah.
does it make sense, and I really poke a little bit into, okay, how do you work with operations or finance, or are you looking at your costs of your rooms? How about your ancillary revenue? Are you trying to do the upsells and F&B revenue and all that kind of, yeah, how do you, yeah. So it really goes granular, but normally I start with an audit where I really kind of look at the big picture and look at, okay, this is the part where we can definitely improve and we can make it more profitable. And also, of course, automation. Because what I find a lot in the individual properties, a lot of manual work, just old
Yes.
school Excel
Yeah.
sheets, So,
I hate it.
yeah, in one of my companies that I worked for, we had a project kill Excel because we have really good systems. But so I'm not saying it's really hard to kill Excels, right? But then what we would do, let's say, or what I always like did in January when the year is fresh, you talk about, okay, these are the projects we finished last year. How did we do? What did we finish? What do we need to pick up? And then also, what are the projects we're going to do for next year and who wants to do what within the team? But also look at all of our tasks. So look at all of the sheets we are making. And there is a question, okay, who reads that? How manual is it? And is it still important? And
Yeah.
you have no idea how many times there was like, who reads it? No one. So those are the things to just, and then really what I try to do is I try to automate things, right? Because now, yeah, you have quite some also companies that can now automate certain tasks like reservations and that they need to be cleaning up reservations and this and that. And yeah, so these things can be done also with AI nowadays and whatnot.
Coming to that in a minute.
Yeah, yeah. So that of course, it's really about what is still important and why do you do it, and yeah, looking at,
Really interesting.
yeah,
And something that I've been in as well. And I mirror you, especially with the amount of admin work that still exists until today in a lot of hotels, which doesn't make sense because we are in 2026 and you can automate a lot of stuff with AI. But yeah, some still traditional old ways are very
yeah,
difficult to change. But
yeah,
I think it's nice transition to my next topic or segment. Commercial alignment, big one, revenue, sales, marketing, operation. We've been there.
yeah.
One topic I find very important, definitely in hotels, is alignment. Revenue doesn't operate in a vacuum. Sales, marketing, operation, distribution, guest experience, all that matters. In your view, what does great commercial alignment actually looks like in a hotel business?
Yeah, in the last few companies I worked for, we went under the restructure of commercial team when it was in the new structure, one commercial team, right? So your revenue, sales, marketing, e-commerce, they're all under the same umbrella and with the same KPIs. I think that's really important because
Important, yeah.
you could have e-commerce. So let's say I'm doing revenue and I am in charge of OT partnerships, right? And then you have marketing, e-commerce team, and they are in charge of direct business. So if you think about it, if our KPIs are not aligned, we might clash, right? Because I need to push this business, they need to push this business. Of course, I know that we need to push direct business from the revenue perspective and not OTA. But, these are the things that we need to say, okay, together we're going to grow by this much. And this is what we're going to do together with our business mix. and then really like aligning on different promotion strategy. And also, if you're, let's say, doing your Google ads and bids, you need to realign with revenue. Okay, where's still a need in what market if you have multiple hotels? Okay, take this money, this hotel is doing good, we are meeting the forecast and budget, and move it to this property because we need some help there. We are not meeting the numbers. But this communication has to continuously happen, and not just, like back in the days, first we had some trouble lining sales and revenue, as you
Oh,
know. And I'm not saying it's like it's Citizen M where we work together, but in any company that was like, a topic forever. And now it's really changed, where I think the companies that realize that this collaboration is not a question anymore
yeah.
are the ones that are going to do better business. So that, I think, has been done, but now we are really putting this like commercial umbrella where you also have marketing, e-commerce within the same team. But also it's about working together with finance, for example, right? So let's say you're doing your budget and you start with your first top line version from revenue, and then all other steps, and it goes to finance, and then they get the costs from the ops and other departments, and then they're like at the bottom line, this is not gonna work. Go back to your drawing table, right? So
Yeah.
so for example, a bridge between commercial and financial department during the budget process makes complete sense. That when you're doing your top line, you know with calculations always see your bottom line, what it would be, right? So then you have less revisions, then you have more transparency on the bottom line, because I am looking at the market, my historical comp set, et cetera, and what I expect to happen next year when I do the top
Yeah.
line. Also, my cost is going to potentially change. So it's good that I have transparency on that.
With
How
risk,
will
yeah, correct. Yeah.
what can I push then when it comes to business mix? What kind of business should we push for in order to have the better bottom line outcome? So
Yeah. Interesting. And we can also talk a lot about this, but I can relate to what you're saying because I also had both experiences. Like I go back to Citizen M, and definitely I think what really made us successful because we all work together as a commercial team, as all
yeah,
department. I think that's definitely something
yes.
that helped us all, navigating. I never had any issues with revenue with you. Like
Yeah,
it
yeah,
was
yeah. Yeah.
that was good. But
And that's amazing, right? And it was
yeah,
the same
it
with
is. It
sales.
is.
And it's also about trusting that everybody is hired to do their job
Yeah,
and with their
correct,
knowledge
correct,
and to
correct.
drive to do their job, right? And not having in some of the companies, and this happens a lot in the
Yeah,
individual hotels, where
correct.
like you have a general manager questioning revenue manager, like, "Oh, what happened with this
Yeah,
SDR last week,
yeah,
and then you're spending an hour on a meeting explaining to a GM a star report, right? Like they should have the knowledge of it, they should be informed,
correct.
but they're not changing rates every day, right? Or like GM saying like, well, but this hotel today changed rate to this much. Like, okay,
Yeah, doesn't work like
I'm
that.
here. So good at what they did today, So it's like, so these are the things where I think it's about building trust. Who knows what? Also, me from revenue perspective, I trust that the general manager will release as many rooms into inventory as they can. And if they have few out of orders, I trust that these few
Will be,
orders
yeah,
are there for a reason, right? I'm not going to question that. It's part of their job, right? So these are the kind of things that are super important. And I do nowadays. I listen to a lot of podcasts about all different trends and companies. And I think one of the things that I just recently listened to was like a research about how much collaboration within the company makes huge impact on overall performance of
agree,
the company.
agree,
So
agree.
in any department, and people knowing each other, really having relationships, that
Absolutely.
makes a huge difference. And that is, I think, the way to go. If you have like in your company 20 superstars in different departments and they don't work together and they don't know each other, it's not going to work, right?
Agree.
So everything's going to be driven by their own goals and their own success. And that doesn't work long
I
term for
agree.
sure.
I fully agree. The magic word is trust. I fully support that. I think if I look back in my career, also my experience, I think what always helped me, not externally with the client, of course, the relationships and the trust and loyalty, but also internally with the team. I think having friends all over every department, knowing everyone, and
Yeah.
having those close connection makes life so much easier, and also makes the understanding. If I have a client, I'm coming from sales, and I have this client, we want to have us, the, like crazy parade.
Yeah.
We would have a conversation, and we would, yeah,
Yeah, and then I know that this is a potentially exception, right? So then I trust that, like, I know that this doesn't happen all the time,
yeah,
and then I will
correct.
just trust your lead from sales.
Yeah,
Okay, do what you gotta do, right?
yeah.
Make them happy. So these are the kind of things, but this is the trust that we build continuously, right? So
I agree. I
yeah,
agree. No, absolutely agree. And definitely something that a lot of hotels should learn from, because the other side is not fun when, everyone is clashing and I'm right and I'm right and you got to do that. And
yeah,
in
yeah,
the
yeah.
end, you lose the business in the end. So definitely.
It-
Nice transition to a very important to my heart, I think, to everyone, AI and technology and the future of revenue. I speak a lot about AI, of course, in a lot of my podcasts, but never about revenue. So I want to learn about that. But let's talk about from your perspective, because it's really changing every part of every business, and it's absolutely in hospitality. But in revenue management, where do you believe AI will create the biggest real impact, and where do humans still need to stay, sometimes in control, or where not? So I have no background, but I want to hear from you.
yeah. Well, okay. Personally, I'm a big AI fan, so I read a lot and use
Nice. That's
three
good.
of them daily continuously for many things. I pay subscriptions and things, but I think it really helps you, of course, in your everyday work. That's not a question. And anybody working in a hotel, if they need to manage an email, that helps, right?
Of course.
That is, of course, the basics. When it comes to revenue in particularly, I think it's still a little bit more behind that we would want it to be, or that we talk about it. So it's, I say AI without a hype. So
Yeah.
you have quite some companies that will automate a lot of these tasks. What we talked about in reservations and whatnot. Data collection, that is a huge one. So it's like, looking at competitor race or these kind of things. I think this is the part where it's huge, where you should be implementing AI, right? Also,
Yeah.
other parts of hospitality when it's like guest communication and these kind of things. But for us, from revenue perspective, it's really like, data. And what I also see a lot of revenue management softwares are still machine learning. Okay. They're saying it's AI, but you could have an AI summarize what happened yesterday and give you suggestions of what you should maybe do.
Mm.
Those systems are still machine learning. So if then formulas, very complicated ones, but it's not, yeah. So I think this is where I see the future. There are some revenue management softwares out there that are really using AI. I think still not to the fullest, where you can really,
For
you
the
can
10,
definitely
yeah.
go. And the thing is, it's a little bit tricky because you still need to, like, I'm all for automation. So if the RMS can do automated rates, I do automated rates. Of course, systems not gonna need to learn like about
Yeah, you need to. Yeah,
this,
yeah, yeah, yeah.
right? So you need to like really fully monitor, and then you can test a little bit, and then you let it go. And then when you see, when it knows the hotel or market or whatever, and it's making decisions that make sense to you, then you fully let it go. But you still need to monitor, right? Because the system is not gonna know that there was like I don't know, strike in
Yeah,
Paris.
you have to feed the
Yes.
system. Yeah, of course.
That we had a flood and we had to close so many rooms for so long. So next year, we don't want it to just look at the pattern of like 2 months that we were fixing this.
Mm.
And so, all kinds of events and these kind of things. So you need to really input in a lot of information into the system, and then it can really make proper decisions. So it's really about,
Very interesting.
letting it go and monitoring and adjusting. I hope to see this, that it's less and less adjusting, right? Because ideally, when there is a system finding online all these events, maybe that I cannot even do the search that it does,
Yeah, 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 yeah.
adding it with, that I don't need to like say, hey, this event is on and this is the impact, positive or negative or whatever. That I think would be a bit of a future for us. And really connecting more data through different systems where it can utilize data in your RMS maybe from another system, even though it's not connected, that it can, use that data to make better decisions.
There's a decision definitely, because Yeah, it is. It is absolutely interesting for everyone, especially if you are in hospitality. Like, do you see AI will improve or is actually improving decision making, or is it maybe a risk to rely on sometimes if you know you want to lose the instinct of the commercial instincts? What do you think?
I think it will only get positive, to be
It will get
honest.
one. Yeah,
It's just
I'm
about,
sure.
yeah.
I think
But
so.
you,
I
of
think
course, you still need to be on top of it. But yeah, if you you're not gonna let Claude just book courses
that.
for you,
Yeah,
you know,
you
you
are.
learn that from the news. Yeah, so it has to be monitored, it has to be controlled, of course. But I do see that it will only get better. And yeah, even if you think about like what we have mostly now, machine learning. I, as a revenue manager, cannot do all this calculation in my dreams, right? And so it is always going to be better in calculating things than I will be. But then, you know, with my calculations, I can still say this makes sense or not, right?
Yeah.
So that I think that check still needs to happen. Yeah, and maybe one day you will just have some hotels that are like fully automated in revenue if it's some like a simple thing and you don't need to have anybody monitoring. I'm not sure if we're gonna ever be there, but maybe we will. But I think
Yeah.
also our job really will change. It already is changing, you know, because
Correct.
before
Correct.
you spend hours and hours of analyzing data to change a rate. And yeah, and you would export it from one system, a report into a different system or whatever into Excel from two systems and then, you know, organize your data and look at everything and then make a decision. Okay, this is what's going to be the new rate. Now the rate changes
Yeah.
continuously,
Of course.
not
Yeah.
happening, right? So that already changed like a lot. And it's super already automating from, if I remember what I did 10 years ago.
Yeah.
Uh,
Yeah.
of course, yeah. How is this exactly going to look? I'm not sure. That depends on the system developers.
Yeah. Yeah. Definitely.
Never ask us to. No, I'm kidding.
But you're right. It's gonna be only positive, especially if you really fed you know your AI system with the right information and then teach it the. I think it's definitely gonna be only positive. Really, really, yeah, well, stay close to this revenue AI future.
Yeah,
Okay, distribution, rate, integrity, and direct business. You know, a hot topic.
yeah, it's the pet peeve in the world.
Absolutely interesting world, and I want to get your insights about you know hotels today always under pressure. I think even more the recent years from every angle, cost, you know, competition, reliance on OTAs as we spoke. But shifting traveler behavior is really important as well. It's something to consider in this environment. What does healthy distribution strategy looks like to you?
No rate parity. That's like almost impossible nowadays. Well, I think if you kind of what I mentioned earlier, have less proper partners and not work with 100 different partners.
That's a good advice. That's a good advice.
Be a little bit careful of certain segments. I'm not gonna mention them. Yeah, but I will give you an example. So when I started at the Pierre, my revenue manager changed above me, right? And then the new guy that came, he wanted to teach me, like, he wanted to show me what distribution means. And he took one room and we traced it back. And that was, I don't know, that was like 12 years ago, exactly. We traced back that one room, how many time it was sold to a different partner until it was booked. It was 9 times. So somebody got our inventory and sold, and then that one sold to another and 9 times, and that was 12 years ago. So imagine what happens today. I wouldn't even dare to start this kind of just for for the fun of it.
Yeah.
It's really, really hard to get the grasp, and it's taking a lot of our time actually to manage this distribution because you need to make the test reservations. Okay, which partner is
Yeah. Yeah.
selling you and all this, and it's really, really and then of course you have some OTA giants that are now like taking that over, and that makes it really less manual, of course. But then even when you do that, I think you have to have less partners in order for this to work, right? So yeah, I could have a in some companies like a full-time person just doing this. You know, it should be like a different department in reservations and yeah, and then also when it comes to like different connectivity issues and latency issues, and then it's like I mean also what I see that mostly now operational revenue and distributional departments are separated, which makes sense. One is really building systems,
Um,
make systems work.
it-
The other one is focusing more of the strategy, and then they work together, of course. But that also makes a lot of sense. And if you're changing the rates, that you're also doing the rate loading or setting up the system. So it depends, but I think that is a bit of a better strategy. Of course, if you're opening the hotel from the revenue perspective, you're the one person doing it normally, so you're not going to have different departments. But yeah, I think that would be a bit of the strategy of on my end, just trying to have a little bit more grasp on what is going, who are you giving your inventory to, and what are
mm,
they doing? Looking at this production, when are they booking, and what are you gaining from this partner? Because
yeah, yeah,
you might have a partner that books 20 room nights a year, and then 10 of those are like resold, right? So, yeah. I mean, of course, also now with some newer laws, you can have a higher rate on your direct, right? So, what I see with a lot of independents is that they're just hiking up like OTA rates because there's always some sort of like, discount on top of discount and this and that. So, which I don't think is the right strategy. I think you should have everything in parity. And if you do promotion, yeah, to one, you should give to the other as well. So it's a
correct.
very, yeah, it's a very complex and tricky subject. I go on and on. So I better stop. We should do another podcast on this.
We said it's very complex, and everyone, every day in hospitality, if you are in sales or revenue or distribution, you
Yeah,
always have those conversations. But yeah, thank you for sharing your insights. I
yeah.
almost cannot believe it's almost the end of the podcast, but absolutely interesting. Before we finish, I just want to have a quick answers briefly in couple of words. I'm going to ask you some questions. Dynamic pricing is it underused or is it overcomplicated? I agree. I
Like it
agree.
should be the focus. If you're not doing dynamic pricing, you should be doing action.
Yeah.
Just did a talk about around this with for a company a few weeks ago, and they're coming from the and camping industry. So that was super interesting. Yeah, and the topic of the whole day was dynamic pricing. So I came from like the hotel side of the business and shared my insight, like static pricing, forget about it.
Yeah,
So
yeah, yeah,
yeah,
yeah. Good
yeah,
to hear. Good to hear. Good to hear.
yeah,
Loyalty or location? What wins more today?
and loyalty. Yeah.
Yeah, I agree. I fully
Of
agree
course,
with this.
location will get you the business. If you have an amazing location, you're always going to have business, right? But you're going to have to maybe spend a lot more money to get more of these first time guests, right? So the guest retention is super important. And so if you think about it, uh, if you have the loyalty, you will have more repeat guests and your cost of your business will go down, essentially.
Yeah, yeah.
So maybe it's a
Correct.
little bit of money to invest into loyalty, of course, but I
The long term is
have
definitely profitable. Yeah, absolutely agree. Coming from experience, and then I always get amazed by, the brand that will make a person travel somewhere and search for that name. I'm going there, it doesn't matter, but I'm going there.
yeah.
So I agree with you. In this world, especially with the recent acquisition, we know Citizen for example, but I want to also ask you that boutique independent hotels, advantage or disadvantage in 2026, 27?
Advantage.
Yeah, I also agree. I also
Yeah.
agree. Nice.
Yeah,
We
I
align.
think people are also a little bit tired of course, there you have a lot of people that are like huge in loyalty and it's like, I'm always going to book this way or this brand because of this, right? But I do, I do think that you can tell a better story if you are, if you stay more independent than like joining a bigger, yeah. Of course, naturally, we're maybe going to have a lot more business coming through that big loyalty and all of that. But I think that you also lose a little bit of this relationship with your guest when it's like, because we are in this business originally for this hospitality, for the relationship, right?
Yeah, yeah,
Do
yeah.
think that I cannot generalize, of course.
Of course. Yeah,
But I think that you lose a little bit of that. And I think you can it just when it comes from branding perspective, you can have a lot more liberty. You can really tell your story and keep your story. So
right.
that's just like, of course, it depends on the case. It depends on the financials and all these kind of things, right?
Of course.
Yeah. I was approached actually recently somebody, it's just a quick one. So somebody is building kind of a little bit of a city in the middle of nowhere with a huge like complex resort, like a little town on its own type of thing, right? And they asked me the same question. Do you think we should go under some sort of like big umbrella of hotels? Or do you think we should do our own brand? And I said, definitely your own brand, because
I agree.
you're going to get a set of rules that you need to follow, and maybe your story will be lost because it was an amazing story. But yeah, they asked for my advice and I said, yeah, I would definitely do independent.
Nice to hear. Definitely also this direction. I think you get a lot of more authenticity as well, and you get easier connections and more care. And don't get me wrong, it's also nice to be in a big loyalty program. Of course, you get the benefits, but I think sometimes you reach to that level that it becomes only about collecting points, or you want the benefits and then you forget about the experience itself and, these connectivity. So yeah, it is a big topic. We can also have another podcast for it as well.
Yeah, we can have another podcast about this. Okay,
I
so
don't
let's
know.
schedule a new one.
Yes, we should definitely. Another quick also question for hotel owners, operator listening. What should they be investing more in this year and the coming years?
Automation,
Mm,
a system automation, and that that actually your staff can focus on guests because they don't need to sit in a back room and
Yeah, correct. Correct.
so I think I would just like focus on that, honestly.
Automation, yeah, correct.
Yeah, and then the good systems that are going to provide that for you.
Yeah, you're right. You're right. Behind numbers for revenue and maybe an advice as well. What success looks like for somebody in revenue behind numbers. So it doesn't matter. It's not numbers. Based on your experience.
It's hard because we are like kind of judged by numbers. I think the impact that you make, like especially now, let's say when I work with individual hotels and boutique hotels, then you can really like make an impact, and that makes me happy, right? So even that educational part, when I see like now they can take over this task and they get it, that makes me happy.
That's a good one. That's a good
I'm
one.
moving a lot more into the educational part of revenue after all these years, which I really enjoy. So that makes me happy, to be honest, like to pass on my knowledge to others. And doing speaking engagements as such, and what you're doing actually for others, just sharing this knowledge, I think that's I think makes you and me happy.
Oh, that's my goal. Absolutely. My main vision from the podcast is really share these stories that is not being told. You get busy, of course, with a lot of life distractions, but of course I want to be a voice for a lot of stories. So thank you for definitely being part of that. And my last question is the famous one for the podcast. What does level up means to you? It can be personally, it can be business wise, it doesn't matter to you.
Just making progress that is meaningful. This is also one of the reasons why I went for my own companies, because yes, I made the numbers for big companies and this and that, and now it's like, can I make a change where the change is not really happening?
Amazing.
That's why I'm on the mission to help really the smaller fish in the sea.
Amazing, amazing. Vlatka, it was really, really nice. I'm glad we had
Same.
this conversation.
Yeah.
So much learning, so much we can still talk about, and we should.
Yeah.
But thank you for your time today, and wish you all the best. To stay in touch. I'm gonna share your information, of course, so people can reach out to you. And of course, if somebody looking for a strategic revenue partner, she is the one.
Thank you. First and last on the podcast, right? No, I'm kidding. No, I really, really appreciate it. I really enjoyed the conversation. Like some challenging questions and some that really, could be debate for another podcast. I really appreciate you taking the time and doing this with me.
Thank you. I wish you all the best. We stay in touch.
Same.
And thank you.
Thank you. Bye.
Every conversation can and will elevate you. It's where real talk meets real growth. After